We'll wait about 15 more seconds till 8 o'clock. Well, welcome everyone. My name is John Rockefeller. I'm chair of the Scholastic Council. There are several council members also here. Danny Rode is vice chair. I see Judith Stare's name. I'm sure if I keep looking, I'll find some other names as well. We have several EB liaisons. Kevin Pryor, Mike Neiman is a former EB member. And so let me just begin by welcoming everyone. I want to apologize. Oh, John Fernandez is here as well. I want to apologize. I'm just getting over COVID, so I might reach for a lozenge here in a moment, but I'll do my best to speak. All right. Well, I just wanted to give a quick overview of the format. So there, as well, obviously Carol Meyer is here. She's the executive director of US Chess. So thank you, Carol, for joining us. So the overview is there'll be 5 initial segments where they'll last 25 minutes tops, 5 minutes for each. The state of Scholastic Chess, review of last year's Scholastic regulations, a review of the proposed changes for this year, and then a review of changes that were either tabled or rejected, and then a quick review of Scholastic ADMs for the past 2 delegates calls. So let me just jump right in. The state of Scholastic Chess is strong. US Chess is back. So let me look right quick at, I want to review just some of the numbers. And so grade nationals starting in December, we had 2,501 players. The previous year, it was 1,200 players. The average is about 1,700 to 1,800. So that was a big jump. It was in the Mid-Atlantic. It was at National Harbor. Followed by high school nationals, which was 1,774 players, which was above average quite a bit, maybe 10% above average. And attendance was capped, so it actually might have gotten larger, but there were issues with capacity at the Washington Hilton. Then we had all girls nationals. That was 482 players. Again, that was above average, so that's a very good showing. The previous year had been 402 players. Middle school nationals, 1,263 players, which was slightly above average. And then elementary nationals, which was 2,114 players, slightly below average, but more than double the last year's. And, I think we had a sense that, elementary, because of COVID, it was the elementary school clubs and players that had been the least active. Maybe they hadn't ever played chess. So we were anticipating more of a lag there. But we think actually, because it's almost the 5-year average, that within the next year or two, we're going to be getting some monster numbers. And I will just note that former EB member Ryan Velez predicts that Super Nationals 2025 could have 10,000 players if US Chess will allow that. So that is something we should be thinking about and preparing for. In addition, US Chess is thinking about transitioning to 2 or 3 anchor sites per tournament. There's difficulty in locating a good location out west, though. And something, oh, and I forgot to mention so we'll do this about 20-25 minutes, and then the final 31 minutes will be completely open. We'll open the floor to comments, questions, feedback, proposals for changes to Scholastic Nationals and Scholastic regulations. But so one question that we might want to consider is the possibility of Las Vegas. What percentage, if any, of schools and or school districts do you think might refuse to send K-12 students there? But again, we'll discuss that much later. Okay, so now quickly, let's go through 2022, 2023 Scholastic regulations. These are the highlights. We had previously only 1 half-point buy was allowed in the grade nationals and the spring nationals. Grade nationals December, and then the spring nationals. so that we up to 2 half-point buys, and clarify the deadlines for declaring those buys. We have revised the appeals process for contesting the eligibility of a player or team. We have updated the rating supplements, rating supplement singular, for grade nationals. This was actually Danny's idea. It was an excellent one. It used to be the November supplement, and he suggested we go with the December supplement. And that makes a lot of sense. In addition, we renamed the ratings review group as the tournament review group to reflect the group's expanded role in the adjudication of issues regarding player and or team eligibility. This is a huge change. We standardized the time control across the 4 nationals. We transitioned to game 90 with a 10-second delay. And we also standardized the round time. So the idea was we didn't want each tournament to be potentially slightly different. You'd have to remember what the round times were. So it's now basically grade nationals, and then the 3 spring nationals, they will meet at the same time, and that can become kind of a tradition for people. They'll have an intuitive sense and not inadvertently miss a round because they were confused about the round time startings. Additionally, this was Robbie Adamson's idea. We've standardized it so they're now 4.5 hours between all rounds, except between rounds 1 and 2 when there's a lot more intro problems to deal with. There it's a 5-hour gap between rounds. We revised somewhat the sections that need to keep notation at elementary nationals and K-12 grade. Basically, we loosened the restriction a little bit, so 3rd graders were affected by that. And we changed the blitz time control at K-12 grade nationals from game 5 delay 0 to game 3 with a 2-second increment. And we also substantially revised the family and friends tournament. Okay, so that's what we did last year. This year, this is what we're proposing. And just so you know that the Scholastic Council is comprised of 7 members elected from the Scholastic Committee. We have subcommittees that meet. And so these are ideas that emerged out of the Tournament Overview Subcommittee and the Scholastic Regulation Subcommittee. We then will revise the Scholastic Regulations and propose it to the Executive Board. But we have no power to determine this. We propose, they decide. So anything and everything that I'm about to discuss now might get rejected by the Executive Board. So here are the changes that we will be proposing. We are proposing to change the name of unrated sections to novice sections and reintroduce team trophies. So on the one hand, we had experimented with not having team trophies in that section because we did not want to encourage entire teams to keep their players unrated and then not participate in local tournaments and state championships in particular, so as to kind of position themselves as well as possible to receive awards at the unrated section. But we also felt, well, wait a minute, there are new teams out there with novice players. So this is the compromise position. We will propose reintroducing team awards, but change the name from unrated, which is self-explanatory, but people don't really know exactly necessarily what that means, to novice, which everyone kind of gets. Oh, these are the beginners. Okay, one other change that we're proposing, excuse me, is that with regard to checkmate and stalemate, it used to be that some of the lower sections, kindergarten, 1st grade, and 2nd grade at K-12 grade nationals, and all K-1 sections, plus all K-3 non-championship sections at K-6 elementary nationals and at super nationals, where there was a process that if a player said, is this checkmate or is this stalemate, there was a process that TDs would go through. So they would see if they would agree on the position, agree on the result, and then even if it were not checkmate or stalemate, that decision would stand. But if that were not the case, if there were disagreement, TD would say, well, what do can you make a legal move? And then if a legal move is made, then the game continues. But if the players think that a legal move cannot be made, and then the TD would ask, is the king in check? And so kind of steering them in the right direction without actually 100% intervening and saying the answer is yes, the answer is no. We want to apply that to all sections. We don't think it should just apply to the lowest, the youngest sections. There will be a new electronic device policies so that we'll be very clear on streamlining infractions and what the punishments for infractions will be. And there will be additionally a new table regarding when points carry over and a section change is made after round one. So that can affect buys. Another proposed change will be the chess control. We want to require one national TD to be at chess control. In addition, this NTD would take over from Mike Hoffpower as a database lead. As many of you know, Mike Hoffpower has written this really cool program called Sniffer, which flags players whose ratings are need review. And we want not just Mike Hoffpower to be on call for all these tournaments. We want a national TD on site who could then be familiar with it and answer questions instead of Mike. In addition, we want US Chess to have not just the director of events to have access to players' contact information. So the language we are proposing is so that US Chess can efficiently contact players in the event of a dispute, problem, emergency, etc. The following people, and only them, will have access to players' contact information: director of events, the assistant director of events, the chief TD, the backroom chief TD, and the chess control manager. We then also will, this is not something that we will be a Scholastic regulation, but something we will pursue with the director of events, Boyd Reed. We want to keep the entry fee, the first two deadlines, as the amount as low as possible. But we also want to do a better job of encouraging players to register early. US Chess obviously also needs to cover increased expenses. So for example, at elementary nationals, there was damage to the Baltimore Convention Center, and I think it was either $5,000 to $10,000. These kinds of things can happen. So US Chess needs the ability to cover those kinds of expenses, as well as if there is an influx of people who register late, to be able to provide them with tables and have to rent, pay the hotel additional costs if necessary. So here's what we propose. If you consider the elementary nationals entry fee deadlines, which ran the 11th to the 14th, it was $80 by April 24th, $100 by May 1st. We propose to keep those the same. However, we propose to increase dramatically the late fees. So if one were to register the day, between May 1st and the day before the tournament starts, currently US Chess only charges an additional $15, so it's $115. We are proposing that be increased to either $130 or $140. And then the on-site fee is $120, which is only a $5 bump over the $115 before. We think that's dramatically too low. So we're proposing $160 or $180. Okay, so those are the proposals that we will be making. And then now these are proposals that were discussed, but we're not going to be proposing to the executive board to change these. One was to make blitz for all the spring nationals also to be G3+2, so game 3 increment 2. That was not, it was basically about 50-50, so half of the people were for it, half against. That did not sail through. So we changed, as I said, this year to G90 D10. Several of us, 3 of the 7 Scholastic Council members, were in favor of, and had been, to change that actually to game 60, delay 30. So there'd be a shorter time control, but with D30, the potential for end games, players having at least 31 seconds per move, and with a recording requirement. That's the key thing. For those of you who will be in US Open, there's an ADM addressing this issue of clarifying the US chess rules, that a game with D30 would have a recording requirement, not just increment 30. It's unclear whether that'll sail through, but that's the part of the idea behind that. Additionally, something that, again, we did not pass, but were discussed, was what to do with unrated players. Should they be allowed in championship sections? Data suggests that about 80% of unrated players who register for championship sections later withdraw. And there were several of us who thought that they should not be allowed in championship sections, or perhaps only as part of a team, so not individuals, or not individuals only. You had to be part of a team. Then there was some thought about perhaps only in upper sections at high school nationals, but again, that was tabled. We also discussed whether players should be required to notate only after they move, and no consensus was reached there. We also considered replacing team trophies with a wooden stand that's currently being given by US Chess. As you know, that US Chess has decided to no longer give team trophies to individuals, but we still give trophies to teams. That was something that was considered for teams as well, but that definitely did not receive enough votes to carry through. There was an issue of result slips. When is a game final, is a result final when the players agree to it, or when the slip is signed. We are going to include that in a best practices document rather than address that in the Scholastic regulations. Additionally, Tina Schweiss, who is a member of the Scholastic committee, submitted a update on virtual schools, but she, no complaint here, but she did so just only 5 days ago. We just have not had time to consider that. It's a substantial change. So I think we're going to look at that in the fall and start discussing it then, and that would be a possible change for the spring. Okay, and then right quick now, we are at the ADMs with regard to last year and this year. The only one that I could find that specifically addresses Scholastic issues was the one offered by Chris Prosser, who is in attendance tonight. Perhaps he could talk about this later. But he proposed a state affiliate Scholastic Chess Advisory Committee, and US Chess ran with that idea, but transitioned in a different way by creating the Chess and Education Committee, which has been having monthly webinars, and we're hopeful that sufficiently addressed Chris's concerns and the larger points he raised. And then I said this year, there are none that I can find that are K-12 specific. There's some that would affect K-12 tournaments, but aren't specific to K-12. All right, well, actually, we are far ahead of schedule. So I anticipated that taking longer. We're 11 minutes early, so it is now 8:18, and we have next 42 minutes to discuss whatever you would like to discuss. So,
John,
please,
so maybe what we can do first is what you talked about. If anyone here tonight has any questions or any comments about what John has already described regarding the changes to the regs from last year, or the proposed changes for this year, or anything that came up in terms of the first few minutes, so that way we can sort of move and be in between topics. So I guess that would be the first way, John, that we should open it up to everyone here tonight.
Sure. So we can start with, raising hands, please, if you would, and we'll call on you, and then the floor will be yours.
Well, I guess I'll start, because one of the things that I saw some shaking of heads and some stuff is the time control, which is probably the most significant change from the previous year into this year's national events. I will say that the time control worked pretty well. The round times also worked pretty well. I think nobody was really complaining as much as what we saw coming out of COVID with the game 120 delay 5. That game 90 delay 10 works pretty well. It provides a little bit more room on the back end for players, especially in the top sections, but it also shortens the day for everyone. That includes players, staff, everyone who's at the events. Ironically enough, in Baltimore, we almost hit the convention center shutdown time for the tournament. So that's something that needs to come up for this year because the high school nationals will be in Baltimore. But the game 60 delay 30, I think the biggest proponent against it, John, is simply that there's just not played enough in Scholastic chess right now. It's played in some states. Some tournaments have it. There's one tournament even in New York that has a game 60 delay 30, which I think is, as John mentioned, one of the ADMs coming this year from the rules committee itself regarding adding delay 30 as the same thing as increment 30. And that's what that ADM is about. So my feedback on the time control is that it's a welcome change. I think streamlining all 4 events has been successful. I think the players and the community have a good sense of what they're going into. It's still a grueling event. You still have to play 3 rounds on Saturday. If we could make it so that there are only 2 games a day, that would be great. But since we have what we have, it works pretty well. And then we'll go from there. So that's my initial thing about the time control, which was probably the biggest change that we made to the high school, middle school nationals, because those events had been game 120, delay 5 since I was a kid. So that's a long time. So that was a good change, I think, John. And I think what it shows is that we're always trying to make positive changes, and it's not always the change that everyone's expecting. And we can't always just sit on it and expect that everything's going to change. You know, John, in 5 years, we could be saying that game 60 delay 30 is the right time control. But for now, I think we're slowly moving along, and we're putting the players in the best possible position. And that's really what all this is about. And I think chess is really coming back, especially at middle and high school. The high school numbers had record numbers. The middle school is doing pretty well. There's an article in the Washington Post about teachers getting upset with their students playing chess during class, right? So if you think about that, it's happening right now in terms of the public perception of what chess is in the schools. And that's really what this is all about in schools and clubs, regardless of the tournaments that exist and the nationals that happen. I think that Scholastic chess is really in a good place, and we need to run with it for as long as it's in the popular sentiment. So it would be nice to keep growing. And it comes down to everyone here tonight. You know, everyone's in a different location. Everyone does their part, and then we all do a good job.
Chris has his, let me unmute you, Chris. All right, I asked to unmute Chris.
Thank you, sir. First off, I do appreciate USGS having the meeting with the Scholastic folks last fall. I think if they could make that a yearly thing, it would be great. I think it would involve more of our especially Scholastic coordinators. The education committee's been doing wonders with their seminars. I love that too. My concern is with is this checkmate? I've done several of these nationals, so have other folks. And with lower kids, I know we're still trying to educate. But especially the next Super Nationals, if we have 10,000 kids, you're going to spend 3 minutes with one game about, do you think it's checkmate? Can you move it? And you're going to look around, and it's going to, like someone said, who wants ice cream? There's going to be 500 hands up. We've always argued about this. To me, is this checkmate is a yes or no question, just like, can my queen move here? Can my knight move here? That is a yes or no question. And I believe it should be, is this checkmate? Yes, it is. No, it's not. Well, and if it's not, it's your choice to figure it out, not ours. But I just think that extending this to all of the levels, to all the tournaments, is going to add a huge time burden onto all your TDs. And again, the other thing at the Super Nationals is traditionally, it's been hard finding enough TDs to do a Super Nationals. And you're liable to have a shortened staff as it is, and more duties when every game some kid asks checkmate is going to take you 5 minutes instead of 30 seconds. Just
I would say that so we're actually the lower sections already have that availability. We're want to expand it to all sections. So I think the focus would be on Would there be more middle school players or high school players? Sure, there'll be some, and it might take an additional few seconds, but I wouldn't anticipate an inordinate amount of drag on TD time.
Chris, I'll give you a good example of why this change was proposed, because in the younger sections, you want to try to make sure the players decide the result, not the tournament directors. That's the first thing. The tournament director's job is to make sure the players finish the game. I know the previous thinking was that, yes, let's try to end the games as much as possible. But if you look at the elementary nationals, what happened this year, the sections that were required to use the rubric, right, were the younger sections. But then the chief tournament director decided, because that's the way they like to run the tournaments, that the other sections would not have that rule in place. It needs to be standardized. Now, I understand with the Super Nationals, that's not for this year's regs. We may need to revisit this, John, for next year's regs because it's a Super Nationals, and therefore there might be too many players. But for the most part, Chris, from what I've seen, there's a lot of good US Chess TDs and staff. And I think that the office has been doing an incredible job of bringing in new tournament directors, especially this year and in the last couple of years, so that by the time we get to Orlando in 2025, there will be significant number of TDs to handle every topic on the board. I think this is something that should be ironed out over the next 18 months before the Super Nationals happens. But I think in terms of number of TDs and whether we'll be able to cover it, I think US Chess will be fine in that respect.
So what is your answer if both kids, neither of them know if it's checkmate and neither of them agree that it's checkmate? How long do you stay there before you step in, or do you not step in and let them sit there for 10 minutes not knowing whether or not it's checkmate?
If they will have to sit there and figure it out. That is part of the learning process, to let the players decide the result and not the adults. And that's just part of what we're doing here. Part of it is, yes, at some point they will be making 50 moves without a pawn move, right? Or that will happen. A TD will be forced to make a ruling because they're making too many moves on the board. But when directors say yes, it's checkmate, but it's not, right? If a player thinks that it's checkmate, but it's not, why is it the tournament director's responsibility to say?
It's not unless a player asks for that ruling. If a player asks you for a ruling and you don't make a ruling, you're not, I mean, that's just my feeling. It's the way we do it in Tennessee. If a player asks us for a ruling, we make a ruling. If a player asks me, can my queen move here? And I say, well, what do you think? What do you think? Do y'all think the queen can move there? I'm not making a ruling. To me, is this checkmate is a request for a ruling. I know there's differences about that, but to me, when someone asks me a yes or no question, even if it includes the outcome of the game, it's still a yes or no ruling about the game. It is this checkmate, yes or no? And when we are vague about it, it just I just don't see that as proper. But if that's what the committee is going with, I'm okay with that. I just don't want to be one of those TDs to have to take 5 minutes with each board saying, what do you think? What do you think? Because to me, it's yes or no. That's just the way I feel about it. So I'm okay with it. I understand the reason behind it, not wanting the TD to declare the game over, but still, to me, is this checkmate is yes or no question from the kid. It's asking you to make a ruling, is this checkmate? And when you don't, then they're asking you a question, you're not answering them, you're making them answer a question.
Mike Hoffauer has his hand raised.
Yeah, personally, I'm with Chris. If they ask, you tell them yes or no. But that's not the issue right now. It's like Chris said, if the council passes it in the Scholastic regs and that's the way it is. What I do think needs to be clarified, though, Danny, is when the TD starts this process and the kids still don't know, what's the guidance on starting the clock again? Okay, because the clock just doesn't sit there turned off. The clock's got to start running again for the player whose move it is. And if I'm the other player, all I got to do is play dumb, like I don't know if it's checkmate, and watch the other guy's clock run out. So we gotta watch the gamesmanship here.
Mike, you were the K1 section chief at elementary, right? How many times did you feel like the directors were held down by this process?
Not at all.
And I think that's part of why I'm answering it the way I am, is because this sort of thing happens in only a few games during each round. And usually the directors are at a place where they walk through the process with the players. And if the players aren't sure about what's going on, then they continue the game from there. And so are we raising this to ask more questions for something that is not really there, and we're just going through it? And I think that's part of it. So it would be good to get the sense from all the TDs in the K1 room, and they would tell us if they're getting bogged down through this rubric. And they, from my knowledge, and both DC at the grades and at the elementary, both section chiefs and all the tournament directors on the floor didn't have a problem with this. And I haven't seen this come up as a problem in the K1 room since the rule was established. And this rule has been in place for the last 6 years. The only thing that's being added to it is that it's being applied to all the sections, where once the kids get older, usually you have less of an issue with walking the players through this process. It's just that it standardizes the rule for the expectation for the tournament directors and the players, so that they can find their own results at the board.
Yeah, I understand. Thanks.
Other questions, comments, feedback? What about Las Vegas?
Yeah, I think I'll step in on this as well. I think we saw this year with the high school nationals that DC was a great place to have the event. The Mid-Atlantic has been wonderful this year when it comes to the tournaments. The numbers are great, but we have to find the right locations. And sometimes the hotels, and I'll answer the Northeast because I live in New York City. I can say that no nationals will exist in New York City anytime soon. And the reason is because the hotel rates is $300 to $350 a night. Okay. If you want the right place, you're going to have it at the Javits Center. I think that's part of it. So I will tell everyone here what has been discussed, which is to have these anchor sites that John was bringing up. So for example, the grade nationals would rotate between Florida, where it's been consistently, and it's going to be at Rosen Shingle in December, and the Gaylord National in just outside DC, where it's very successful. The middle school nationals, one of the ideas is to place one of the anchor sites in Dallas. Okay, high school nationals, one site in Chicago. Elementary nationals can go back and forth between the different locations. The biggest issue on the board for finding anchor sites and finding locations, right? You must have an airport that works well, right? People have got to be able to fly to the airport. Sometimes some of the events are not in places that are easy to fly to. Another thing, what is the average hotel room night? Some people are willing to pay it, but we're dealing with schools and budgets. So we need to keep that rate as low as we possibly can, okay? And then the last one is, how can we find a suitable site over time in the western half of the United States? Because it's easier to find places in the East. All the New Yorkers are ready to go to Florida, ready to go to DC, ready to go many places. But if you look at the history of where the events have been located, it's been hard to find a quality site repeatedly out west, maybe say west of Dallas or Chicago. So I think those are the topics when it comes to the location. And I'm sure there's more hands about location, John, so go ahead.
Yeah, so Caleb Brown, you're recognized.
Thank you. So I think on the idea of anchor sites, if we're going to do that, I would think subject to, it being somewhere that, the acceptable hotel rates, airport, etc., the focus should be in placing those in areas where you have a lot of Scholastic chess activity. I think that should probably be the principle, because if a Scholastic chess tournament, if a chess tournament is held in a particular area, the people that benefit from the vicinity the most are the people that live nearby. So if we're going to do this, we should try to impact as many Scholastic chess players as possible.
Caleb, I will help you with this, because look at what happens with the middle school nationals when it's in Texas, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm from Texas.
I know. And that's why I'm saying it like this, because the middle school nationals, a lot of the players in the lower sections are actually elementary school kids who can travel there pretty easily. So 70% of the field this year was from the state of Texas at the middle school nationals. So it's always good to have a solid base in the local area for where you want to place the events as well. And I think that's another thing from Boyd, which he has also brought up. So it's there. So
Tom Browns Gomez is, you have the floor.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tom Brownscombe. I'm the Scholastic Coordinator for the state of Nevada, NTD, International Arbiter, FIDE Master, former USCF Scholastic Director, former co-chair of the Scholastic Council. That's my chess resume in brief. And I just want to say, as a resident of Las Vegas and a national tournament director in Las Vegas and the Nevada State Scholastic Coordinator, we would be very, very pleased to have Las Vegas become an anchor site for the Nationals. I think it's a wonderful idea.
Dwayne.
Dwayne, you have to wait. I'm asking you to unmute. Right, I've asked him to unmute, but Dwayne hasn't yet. Anyone else want to speak while Dwayne's doing that? Tom Langland.
Okay, I'm the one. Anywhere on the West Coast, I'm obviously from Northern California. It would be expensive to have it out here. There are some facilities out here. Santa Clara Convention Center has enough space. I'm not sure it has enough rooms or the available hotel room night, but that's one place that you can consider. If you could easily handle.
Tom, I can't hear you very well. Can you speak up a little bit?
I'm sorry.
Maybe I'm the only one.
Probably not. Okay, now can you hear me?
Much better.
Okay. So I'm from Northern California. Anywhere on the West Coast would be great for the kids that are out here. There's a lot of kids out here in the Bay Area and in, I want to say, Southern California and Las Vegas that are, so there's a huge Scholastic community out here that would love to have it out here. The Santa Clara Convention Center has enough space. I'm not sure what the cost would be to get all of it. There is one hotel that's right next to it, but I'm sure that might be expensive. Las Vegas would be great if you guys have it there. I'm sure a lot of people from the Bay Area and probably as well as Southern California would be happy to come out there as well. So I'm all for Las Vegas, anything on the West Coast. I know that we're having something up there in Spokane soon, and that's another great thing that we're moving things out here to the West Coast, and there will be plenty of tournament directors and kids that are willing to come out there and do that. So if Boyd or anyone needs any contacts or anything else like that, have them feel free to contact me. For example, the US class, we're coordinating that with the Northern California Chess Association and the Southern California Chess Association are actually working together to have that event, switching back and forth between Northern and Southern California. So we are willing to help out with anything to put this together on the West Coast. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Jacob Mayer.
Yeah, thanks, John. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to echo my support for, obviously for the West Coast, but I just wanted to add that, for example, the National Open or a lot of these other Vegas chess festivals get a lot of these Washington Scholastic kids out. You know, when just the availability for flights, like for a place like Vegas or LA, is just so readily available and actually pretty reasonably priced, especially when compared to traveling farther east. So, yeah, whatever can be done to push it to either California or especially Vegas. I know that Washington contingent's usually very happy to see things in Vegas because that flight's really quite easy. But if there's any more information about how to get involved with 2025 in Spokane, as a Washington person, I'm happy to do my part.
Thank you for that. Does anyone want to speak against Las Vegas? This is your shot.
John, can I speak?
Please, Dwayne.
Yeah. Well, I've traveled many nationals in the past. I even hosted one in Buena Park, California. And in the course of all of that, one thing I've realized is I understand how those of Eastern location and Midwest feel about traveling out to California or Tucson, Arizona, or in Oregon, Portland, or whatever. But we also have to understand that you're asking us year after year to take care of that. And because you're asking for us year after year to take care of that, it's a little difficult for us to promote our programs also. And we do have a lot of young people that are playing. I think that point was made by my Northern California friends and folks or whatever. So it's not easy to ask you to travel, but this country is not a single state, nor is this country composed of a single region. So when the decision's made about where we're going to place something, you know, I understand. I feel the concern of that, but I've had to travel to Terre Haute, Indiana. I've gone to a number of Philadelphia, a number of other ones. Not to burden the point, but please consider that there are our young people and there are those who have to travel year after year after year, and that's been difficult. I think one that really can speak to that probably would be Jay Stallings. So.
Will do. Jay, let me ask, I'm going to rename you because I thought you might have been able. Not Able Telemontes, Jay Stallings.
Hey guys, yeah, Jay Stallings. I was chair of the Scholastic Council at one point, and I've run the state championship in Southern California about 25 times or so. And I know that a lot of people will say that we don't have the numbers when the nationals come out here, but that's not an argument that holds water, because we just don't have it often enough to build up the numbers through the coaches and such. So, you know, I don't think that that's a fair assessment. I think that we do need a different kind of marketing out here. Our coaching community isn't as closely knit. We don't have as many school teams. We have more club teams in Southern California. Tom can speak to the Northern California side of that as far as clubs and versus the schools. We don't mind going up to San Jose, Santa Clara for tournaments. I think Vegas has a much smaller Scholastic community. Tom Brownscombe can answer that one, but our Southern California, we had just an average Scholastic recently had 300 kids in it. And that's without that strong school team thing that's happening. So I believe that the West Coast can do this. We just need to not do it 1 year and then 5 years later do it again, and then go with those numbers and say, see, we can't have it out west. So that's not a legit argument.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. So Carol Meyer has a poll she's put together for us. Tom has his hand raised. So Tom, if you want to speak on that, or on if it's something other than Vegas, perhaps hold off while we do this. But if you want to discuss Vegas while we're voting, please feel free.
I would love to discuss Vegas throughout the entire rest of the meeting. I think it's a wonderful town. I choose to live here because I think it's a wonderful town. The facilities are great. The question was, how big is our Scholastic chess community? For those of you who want to know, we had 200 something players in our state Scholastic. For some states that seems small. We don't certainly have the same size Scholastic community as California. But at the National Open last month, we had our International Youth Championship, and we had over 400 players. A lot of California kids came for the International Youth Championship and the Youth Trophy Tournament at the National Open. Seems like the California kids really like coming here.
Yeah, so John, I think what it is that Vegas has some pros and some cons. And I remember writing something about this even pre-pandemic. A lot of the pros about it is there's a lot of conference space. Airport is good. Hotels, there's a lot of hotels. The biggest negative is the perception. I think Jacob pointed that out. The perception that Vegas is not a kid-friendly area. So there's a lot that's going on there. I think it's something that over time we will figure out. I do think the idea of anchor cities is good. I think the office is really going to try to look for more West Coast destinations to have it. But at the same time, this is what Boyd has always said, which is, I believe it's Dayton, Ohio is within this biggest city within an 8-hour drive to the most populated areas of the United States. So that I think is also something there. Frank, I will discuss CCA after CCA events in those cities because Albany, Hartford, and Springfield do not have big enough airports to host a national event. Bradley's not big enough. But I do think that it's something that we need to look at, which is the anchor sites. But John, I do want to move to other areas if people have questions in other areas before the hour wraps up.
Sure. Does anyone else have topic here she wants to raise? Chris.
All right, this has been kind of a hope or wish of mine for a few years. We had one for a while. There's a new business item to bring back kind of the SAS thing, $2 per member to go to states. Talking about $200,000, that's quite a bit. I'm not sure if it'll pass or not, but my question is that as we have now, Carol, you can answer this, probably around 60,000 Scholastic members. Yet still we have no Scholastic coordinator for the U.S. Chess Association. And I think that's almost criminal. And I think that all of the Scholastic committees, no matter what their levels, we should all be fighting for U.S. Chess to take $1 or $2 per Scholastic member and hire someone not to work for the Scholastic Council or either Scholastic committee, just to coordinate with the state Scholastic coordinators, with Scholastic affiliates, with clubs, with parents, and have an official, every state has a Scholastic coordinator, yet our national association does not have a Scholastic coordinator to deal with Scholastics. And I just think that's criminal. And I don't know how to fix that. I can fuss about it. I tend to fuss a lot and I apologize for that. But I do think that it would benefit the association, and we have the numbers and the members, 60,000 kids, and they get nothing other. I know they get a lot for their $20, but they don't get representation there at the U.S. Chess office. They don't get their own coordinator. We have a coordinator for everything, a FIDE coordinator, we have this coordinator, that coordinator, nothing just for kids. I know the committees do great. We need a Scholastic coordinator to work with our state Scholastic coordinator. So
100% agree. Brian Ribnick had his hand raised.
Well, it was actually a thumbs up in relation to the last comment regarding a Scholastic coordinator, but the other thing I was going to bring up, it's kind of controversial and probably be shot down, but it's something long term I'd like to see. And you know, we recently switched the National Middle School to K-8 and got rid of the K-8 and K-9 because of the trends of schools in the country going to the K-5 elementary and 6-8 middle school and 9-12 high school. And so in that light, I would like to see down the line at the elementary be only a K-5 event. I know that's going to be a little more controversial, I believe, from what I've heard, than getting rid of the K-9. But I think there's a lot of gamesmanship and that happens when coaches are deciding which section to enter in. It happened with in the junior high when it was K-8 and K-9. But I'd like to see that also eventually just be a K-5 event. So,
Thank you, Brian. There are 3 people with their hands raised. Does anyone want to specifically address what Brian just raised? The idea of Danny.
So this has been looked at with K-5 and K-6 as something where, first of all, if you look at the elementary nationals, the numbers of players is such that you can have both sections. Most of the K-5 schools enter the K-5 section. Most of the K-6 schools play in the K-6 section. This K-6 sections at the tournament, especially this past year, were mostly sixth graders. That is a good sign. You're not seeing the messing around with the sections like you did at the middle school. The other thing was we have the proper rating categories right now for the elementary nationals and enough players in the K-5 and K-6 championship sections so that you can have both. So it is working relatively well. And I think there's more areas around the country that also have K-6 schools. New York is K-5 for public schools, but I do know that there are some schools out there that are K-6 and many other areas are K-6. There's less of the ninth graders. And this got discussed within formerly the section subcommittee, Brian, which you are a member for a period of 2 to 4 years. So I don't anticipate that change happening anytime soon. If the numbers are such that we can have both championship sections, that would be great. Yes, I know the Rockefeller is K-5, but K-5, that's the Rockefeller event. That's a completely separate event.
All right, so the order is Caleb, Chris Kim, and then Dwayne. So Caleb, you first, please.
Thank you. So something I've thought about for a while is that maybe the Scholastic National should, in addition to schools, allow like Scholastic chess clubs to compete as teams, because I know if you're a big school, then that's fine. But if you're like your small school, you may have just a few chess players, and maybe, or even you're homeschooled, and where you really get your Scholastic chess is not really from the school, it's from like a Scholastic chess club of some kind. So I think that might be something that at least should be considered for some point in the future.
Caleb, the Junior Chess Congress has club awards, first of all. So that tournament, which is a bid out event that the office has for anyone here who's an organizer who wants to host that event, can free and willing host the Junior Chess Congress. I think the problem is if you do clubs, what is the definition of a club? The definition of a school is much easier for the tournament itself to host. And the definition of a school has been brought up by the Scholastic Committee year after year. And even with Tina's update to virtual schools, it's even more of a thing, right? But there is a club, there are club tournaments, right? And schools don't pay for their kids in non-school events, that as well. So it's a little tricky to then say, let's have both, let's have everything, right? There are events out there designed for clubs. Now, yes, there are some people who are benefiting from it, like the schools who come year after year who have built big teams, and maybe kids who are not at a place or a school that has more than, say, 1 or 2 people at it is getting hurt by it. But I do think that everyone's coming to the tournament still, and we have to figure out a way to help them. One other thing that's been proposed, Caleb, is mixed doubles prizes. And that's something that the committee and the council are looking at so that everyone can participate on some sort of team. It's still yet to be parsed out. At some open tournaments, mixed doubles has been very popular. So there are a lot of different sort of ways you could do it, but I don't think that club teams is the way to move forward at the national events themselves. It's just making those other events like the Junior Chess Congress more popular so that there are opportunities for clubs to succeed.
Yeah, I think there's no appetite among the council for, reconstituting or redefining what constitutes a team regarding clubs. A compromise would be potentially recognition. I recall that the Charlotte Chess Center asked for, potentially that kind of a thing. One sticking point, I think, was it is possible to do that with Swiss. I'm only familiar with Swisses. Swisses, you can definitely do that by clubs. I've heard that you can't win TD, but I'm not sure. But I think the only traction would be possibly recognition of clubs, but not team awards per se. Chris Kim.
Okay, this is just a comment that I have with Chris Prosser about a Scholastic coordinator. We used to have someone like that in the last decade. Jerry Nash was the last one I remembered, and then that position disappeared. So I just want either the Scholastic Council, maybe Carol Meyer, the executive board, or other people who have long institutional memories, why that position is faded. if we're going to bring that up, we have to figure out what happened to that in the last decade. That's the only point I want to bring up.
Mike Hoffbauer, do you want to, or Mike Neatman, someone who's been an EB member in the past? Certainly been around long enough. Do you want to address that? There's Tom. Let me get him. Tom, the floor
Well, I
is
can
yours.
certainly give you my perspective on this. I was the USCF Scholastic Director from 2000 to 2003, and that, of course, was now a long time ago. Gosh, I'm old. But at the time, the USCF was having serious financial troubles, and the newly elected executive board decided they needed to cut positions. And they looked at the salaries and they looked at how much they were paying me, and they decided that they could cut my position and save a bunch of money. And in fact, the discussion was, gee, you know, if we cut a position that's at a lower level, we actually are cutting a smaller salary, we'd have to cut two positions. So, I mean, from my point of view, it was a financial decision back in 2003 when the USCF was desperately strapped for money, that the USCF could not afford a scholastic director anymore, and the position was simply eliminated.
Mike Neatman or Mike Hoffbauer, do you want to weigh in on that? No. Mike?
Well, I'll just say that it was primarily budget reasons, as Tom stated, subsequent to that as well. So the EB now can advise if we're in a better budget status and that it could even be possible, or if it's desired.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Dwayne?
Okay, a couple items. First of all, State Scholastic Coordinator. I'm the one that put the motion in to create it. And I created it specifically to have an identifiable person in each state. And there are many things that I think have been positive about that. I like the idea of having a national state scholastic coordinator, someone who works with those 50 plus people and creates their activities, supports them, and helps out. But that's a financial issue. That's a organizational issue. So I'll leave it to them. Second item, Las Vegas. There has been a change in Las Vegas. I live 5 hours from Vegas. Tom lives in the city. Janelle and Alan Losoff have sponsored scholastic activities with their national, their invitational event there, and are drawing over 300, 400 kids. That's just a minor amount, but I think we need to take another good look at Las Vegas, because NorCal, SoCal, Arizona, all of the others that are in the area, even Colorado, there's a good chance that we can travel and support that location. And flights into Vegas are usually cheaper, and there's a lot of hotel space and opportunities to take advantage of that particular site. I know I've spent the last 50 years involved in scholastic chess, so I know the challenges of, quote, East Coast, quote, West Coast. Sadly, it's what it is, but don't drop Las Vegas out of the consideration. I think it does need to be looked at. Thank you.
Sometimes I also want to bring up, I know that the state scholastic coordinators are brought up a lot tonight. I do think it's just more than about the scholastic coordinators. We're talking about teachers, the idea of having a person who can reach out to school districts, know when certain budget items are coming up, know when to advise council, scholastic council, and a lot of things. The Scholastic Council right now, just for everyone's knowledge, puts in an enormous amount of hours and stuff on a lot of different categories and does some of these, reach outs already. So it would be nice to have this sort of a thing, but how to define it properly so that they have specific tasks and that they know what their objectives are would be a good start. I don't know if it's necessarily just with the state scholastic coordinators. I think it's reaching out to other areas around the country where they need to know more about chess in general, or how to build a chess club, or inside the school district. Sometimes it falls on the other members of the office to do that, and they're overworked in this way. So it's just something that could do more things than just working with a 50-person body. And one of the things for tonight's meeting that was interesting was I was trying to re-coordinate who the state scholastic coordinators were, because that list, I'm not sure, is completely accurate. So we need to make sure that that list gets repopulated so that we know exactly who in which state. And I know Mike Neatman, his National State Invitationals Committee, appreciated that. I'm hoping that we get to more of a place where we know who is doing what chess in what state. And it's a constant state of, between the committee, the council, and everyone else, how to make sure we know, well, what type of chess is going on in your area, right? What type of chess is going on? Is it rated? Is it not rated? Is it something that we need to get more rated chess? What are the hurdles to making it a rated chess tournament? Or is it just, okay, well, chess is in the schools. There's a lot of unrated play going on, but for some, that's all they want. So we have to be aware of the expectations, is what I'm saying.
Frank Del Bonis, floor is yours.
Very quickly, does the state coordinator, does it have to be the state affiliate? Because in our state, I ran the, I was curious because I ran the state affiliate for 27 years, and then I stepped down. The current state affiliate runs 50% of their scholastic tournaments outside the state, as well as when I was at 30, 40 teams, there's 12. I'm actually running a league with almost 40 teams now, and I'm not the scholastic coordinator. So my question is it fall on the scholastic coordinator, fall on the state affiliate?
The state affiliate has the responsibility to ensure there is a state scholastic coordinator. Okay. Because we have had issues in the past, and Dwayne can relate to this, I'm sure, where even when you had a state coordinator, there was miscommunication within the state because one state sent 2 kids as their representative for a section, and Dwayne had to pull some magic in order to, to appease some parents. So, it's absolutely imperative that the state scholastic coordinator is a person appointed by the state affiliate, the state chapter.
Mike.
Well, the previous speakers have stolen a lot of my thunder. As Danny said, I'm National Scholastic or National State Invitational Committee Chair. And I've been busy the last 2 months or so filling the slots that in states that did not nominate people. And I did use the posted state coordinator list that's on the US Chess website. There are a few of them that never responded or got rejected for one reason or another. Many did reply, and I'm appreciative of that. But one of the ideas I came up with that we're going to discuss in our workshop at the US Open is that the committee can generate a best practice document. And if US Chess and the EB agrees, send that out to the state affiliates and also the state scholastic coordinators. And one of the bullet points on there is to keep your information up to date with US Chess. And hopefully, that'll help a little bit, but it is a good list to work with, but we got to just make sure that the data is up to date. So thank you.
All right, well, just want to let everyone know, Carol has her hand raised. Oh, no, that was an applause. Well, so it's 9:02. I will happily stay on for as long as anyone wants to talk further, but want to be respectful of people's time. Thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate your comments and input tonight, and we hope to see you at the US Open or future Scholastic meetings. So thank you very much. But again, I'll stay on, and if anyone wants to talk further, let's just please roll straight into that.